After a 20-year national campaign for redress, a day of reckoning came. On June 22, 2006, Prime Minister Stephen Harper apologizes for decades of legislated discrimination.
The best thing that came out of the apology was the educational aspect. The whole of Canada, and even other parts of the world, including my friends in New Zealand and even the United States, learned about a part of Canadian history, which I think was the most meaningful aspect of this whole effort. As for history itself, with today's society, we're just so distracted by so many things. We're going to forget, but because there's going to be a legacy, it'll be documented. And I think future generations will benefit from the richness that is Canada in terms of how this place came and all the ugly warts that came along with it. Eventually, the newer immigrant Chinese Canadians and the ones like myself of multi-generational and low IQ, as we call it, they will intermarry, they'll inherit each other's history, and after a while, I think all Canadians will be proud of the right thing. In other words, not forgetting this part of Canada's history.
I think it had to come. It took a lot of pressure, a lot of activists that I think had as much passion as my dad to get this through. As for the amount, you can never cover the amount. It was wrong, right? And I think the greatest thing is that the recognition of the wrong and not to have the wrong happen again.
I gave Harper considerable credit for apologizing. At the same time, giving us back the symbolic money. It's not that we need it, but due to the fact that they acknowledge the fact that Canada mistreated her Chinese Canadian citizens, and it's well deserved.
We're in Canada, we're in a beautiful country, and I think it's necessary to contribute. It's wonderful to be from wherever the home is that you had, but now that you're in this country, I think it's appreciative to be contributing to this country, but at the same time, understand your own background and appreciate it.
And that's what my grandfather and my dad and my uncle always instilled. He says, my grandfather says, just remember that you're Chinese. Remember who you are. That's the important thing. Remember who you are. You're Chinese, but you're Canadian, but you're Chinese. And that's I think that's the secret in being a real Canadian. If you know where you came from, you can be a Canadian. You got to have a foot in both cultures to become a real person, else you lose your identity.
They always have been good examples of, good citizens. I give the old folks credit that they put out they lived by these principles, and they still knew that they had to work hard, but they're not bitter. They talk about the head tax, but I think most of them have forgotten about it.
I remember the things that went through my head when I was in the village, standing in Gonam and thinking, what if, the fact that these guys had to get on a boat and cross the ocean, going to an unknown land to do some manual labors in a foreign country where the weather is, totally different. For them to go on a whim and a prayer, and you think, gee, if they hadn't done that, and then you look at your surroundings, it's like, where would we be? That's a pretty humbling experience.
I think the thing you have to be very proud of is what some of your ancestors, what they've done to get Canada to where they are, whether it be negative and the discrimination and, the railroad building, the dangerous jobs and all of that, but what they've really accomplished. And also, I guess, what they've accomplished that's much better had they never ever left and did not come to Canada. And you should be proud of this. And you should also go back and visit the history of how your family came to be. I think it's so important because the histories will get lost. If you're here in Canada, I think their opportunities are limitless, and you can really take advantage of that and do anything you really want to be.
Without the contribution of the Chinese railroad laborers, and without the contribution of the Chinese sweat and blood, this country that we're living in today would not be the strong and free and economically privileged country that we are today. It's directly because of the Chinese laborers and the Chinese contribution that we are afforded the freedom and the rights of this beautiful land today. And so to just embrace that every day and never take that for granted, and to just appreciate everything that this country has to offer. I think that this is an important part of our Canadian history for all Canadians, not just for Chinese Canadians. So that's those are my parting words in terms of the preservation and the acknowledgement of how do we honor our ancestors, and how do we pay tribute to our ancestors today that we're so far removed from their contribution. And I would challenge the thinking on that. We're not so far removed from the contributions of our ancestors. We are intimately connected to those contributions, and now it's our turn in this generation to carry the torch and move forward in terms of raising awareness of our Chinese history and of our Chinese contribution.
The Chinese have been in Canada since 1788, when 50 Chinese artisans came with John Meares in his sea otter ship off the coast of British Columbia. They also came during the 1850s to mine gold. They came with their children, their family. But the most important thing that they did, the Chinese, was to help build the British Columbia section of the Canadian Pacific Railway in the 1880s. This is the foundation in which the community's future, Canada's future, is being built.